All right, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us here today at Lichtsinn Motors, where we're just 1 mile down the road from the Winnebago Itasca and the Winnebago Touring Coach Factory. Today we're going to do a webcast for you on how to de-winterize your RV. Of course, it'll vary a little bit from each coach, as everything's a little bit different. But we've got Bill, one of our RV certified technicians, who's going to walk you through that. Make sure that you ask any questions along the way, and we'll try to get those answered for you. So Bill, I think he's going to start out here at the water heater, and again, just gradually walk you through how to de-winterize your coach now that we're all thinking spring. And again, just be sure to chat in any questions that you've got along the way.
Okay, we might as well start here at the water heater. Now you notice this water heater is a Suburban water heater. Now there's 3 different water heaters you might have on your coach. Up until the last few years, the majority of them have been Atwood water heaters. But now we're coming up with the Suburbans. We also have, I don't remember the brand, but we have a tankless water heater also. So there's 3 different things that you need to do. Most of you are going to be using antifreeze when you winterize your coaches. If you're using antifreeze, leave your water heater in the bypass mode while you're blowing out your lines, while you're flushing water through your lines. Otherwise, you're going to get more antifreeze into your tank than what you really want to get. Leave it in bypass. On the tankless ones, there is no bypass. You flush the water or the antifreeze in the water right through all the lines in the tankless, and that's all there is to it. When you're getting clear water out of your hot lines inside, then you've got your water heater completely flushed out. Now, after you've gone, you hook your hose up, go through all of your lines. Now, if you've got it just depends on how you winterize. Some people will run antifreeze through, then they'll leave all their drains open and everything. So I recommend that if you do that, you close all your drains, everything, before you hook it up to water. We don't want to flood out somebody's coach. So,
right. But
hook it up to water, turn it on, and go into each one of your faucets in your sink, flush your toilet. Make sure you're getting all of the pink antifreeze out of everything. After you've done that, turn your water back off. Now don't forget your outside faucets. Now your outside faucets are real easy to forget because you don't use them very much. When you get them all flushed out, you're going to come out and you're going to open up the drain on the water heater. Then you're going to open it up and allow some of the water to flush through the tank so that any antifreeze that gets in there, you want that flushed out too. After that, turn it back off, put your plug back in. Now this particular water heater has an anode rod where the drain is. It's a rod that's about that long. It's attached to the drain plug, and it will deteriorate away as instead of eating the tank up, it eats that anode rod up. It's a good time in the spring to put a new one in there if you see that yours is down to, I'd say, less than 50%. When you get down to where you've got there's a solid steel wire in the middle. When you get down to where you're seeing any of that wire, it's time to replace it. It needs to be replaced.
Now, keep in mind, as Bill's covering all this information too, that if you do have any questions, you can go ahead and chat those in, and we'll cover those as we go.
Okay, now we've flushed out all of our sinks, the toilet, outside shower. We now have flushed out the water heater. Put the plug back in the water heater. Turn your water back on. Now you want to fill your water heater up, so you're going to go to your hot faucet and you're going to turn it on until you get a steady stream of water out. As long as you have turned your bypass on the back to where you're not bypassing your water heater. If you get water right off the bat and you don't get any air, then you haven't turned your bypass back on.
And so now where do you typically find that bypass valve?
The majority of them are right on the back. Now Winnebago and some of them will have it in a compartment. If you had a compartment right next to it, sometimes they're right there. In several of them, like the Adventures, the Journeys and things like that, you'll have it down where your water pump is. There'll be a water heater bypass and also the valve that you turn when you're doing your winterization. They'll be in one area there.
Okay. And now keep in mind, for any of you, everyone who has a Winnebago or Itasca coach, all of your plumbing diagrams are located right on the Winnebago website as well. So if you need help locating that bypass valve, you can use your diagrams in order to find that.
Right. But anyway, we're going to once we get our tank full, The couple of things that people forget about is if you have a refrigerator with an ice maker, you need to bleed that line out. Now on the back of the refrigerator, this one does not have an ice maker. But on the back of the refrigerator, you're going to have, if you do have an ice maker, you're going to have a little electric solenoid that sits right in this area. Now that's with the standard refrigerators, not the residential style. But you're going to have a little valve that sits right here that has a 1/4-inch line going into it. Take and unhook that. Now this is not under pressure. When you're unhooking any lines, don't do it under pressure. Turn your water off, bleed the pressure off. Take this and release it so that you're going to bleed any water or any antifreeze that's in there out on the ground. Because we don't want the antifreeze up inside. You'll get pink ice for a while. And you should probably, when you do start making ice, the first couple loads of ice, you're going to want to throw them away anyway. But you flush it out of that line, and then you hook it back up, and just let it go ahead and make ice for the next day or so. Now remember, in order to make ice, you have to make sure that your refrigerator is running on 110 volts. You have to have 110 volts for your ice maker to make ice.
So do you typically want to toss out the first couple batches of ice?
Absolutely, yes. Because you're going to have a little bit of, even if you didn't have any antifreeze in the lines, you're going to have a little stagnant water, and you might have had water left in your tray at the end of the year from last year. So I would just dump out the first, maybe even the first bucket full, throw it away and start over.
Okay. Very good.
Once you've got it all flushed out, you've got everything flushed out. Now, a lot of coaches have water filters, either a whole house filter on the outside, or you've got a water filter underneath your sink. Now, after you've got it all flushed out, that would be the time to put a new water filter. The beginning of the year is a good time for a new water filter. Some people try to extend the life out because the water filters say right on them how many gallons are good for. And if you haven't used it and you've taken it in the house and saved it, it's up to you. They're not that expensive that I think I would probably put a new one in at the beginning of each year.
So once a year is probably good enough?
Usually, because most of your water softener, water filters, now your outside one has a cartridge you can replace. The outside one is a relatively inexpensive cartridge to replace. That's something you're probably going to replace a couple of times a year. They're readily available, and they're anywhere from, you can get them like 2 for $5 all the way up to $10, depending on what you're getting. So cool. That's relatively cheap. Your ones under the sink are anywhere from the 35 range to the 55 range. It depends on when you get them, where you get them, if they're on sale and everything else.
Great.
But after you've got it flushed out, then put the new filter in it. You don't want to be running the pink fluid through your water filter. So.
Okay. Great.
Any questions?
Going to cover everything water heated related. The tankless water heater, is that much different as far as unwinterizing?
No, the tankless water heater, all you've got to do is bleed out your lines, because all your hot water goes through your tankless water heater. It's just, all it has is a continuous loop through the heat exchanger, and then when it comes out the other end, it's hot. So there's no tank, there's just a bunch of lines that goes through.
Sure.
So.
Great.
So you're flushing it. It's a lot like the AquaHot. If you have an AquaHot system, you're going to just run the hot water until you get all the antifreeze out. And another thing with the AquaHot, and I know we're de-winterizing and not winterizing, but they've told us many times that if you're using air to blow out your systems and you blow them all out, that on the AquaHot systems you should always put antifreeze back through the AquaHot, because it leaves those plastic tubes, if you're using the heat, it leaves those plastic tubes exposed to too much heat without having any water to absorb it.
Okay.
So they really do want you to leave the antifreeze in the AquaHot when you winterize them. So.
Okay, good to know. And we're just going to cycle back to a quick question that we've got here, wondering how the filter would work with the residential refrigerator.
On the residential refrigerator, when you take that filter out, there's a plug in your coach. A lot of times we leave them all in the same place. So if you have a plug in the filter that's under the sink, we'll leave that in the same place that we leave the residential refrigerator. And when you winterize that in the wintertime, you've taken that filter out and put the plug in. So after you've got it all flushed out, same way with residential, you need to let it make ice. You can go behind the residential refrigerator, and on the back of the refrigerator, there's going to be a 1/4-inch line with a little T-valve in it for draining. You can open that up and let the water push out all the antifreeze to that point, and then do the same thing as you do with these refrigerators. Let it sit overnight and make ice, because it will work all that pink antifreeze through. Now, on the residential refrigerators, once you've got it out to here, go inside and either take it's best to use a gallon jug or something and put it in where you're going to fill up your water, like your glass. If you use a glass, when it sprays out and blows air, you might make a mess. But if you do it inside of a gallon jug, it'll spray into the jug. Contains it much better.
Sure.
So flush all of it out, because inside the back of the residential refrigerator, you've got a bladder in there that stays cold in the refrigerator for a long time. So when you're de-winterizing, if you've run antifreeze into that, you're going to run it's a couple of gallons worth of water you're going to run through there before you get all that pink out. So.
Sure. So, but now a water filter is going to filter, there's quite a few of the residential refrigerators that have access to ice and water on the front of the refrigerator.
Right.
It'll filter that water as well.
It'll filter that water as well. But you're not going to change that filter either until you get it all washed out, all flushed out. So.
Yep. And just a reminder that we do have, we can access any of the filters or parts that you might need for winterizing, antifreeze, all of that we have available through our parts department, so we can help you out there as well. So.
Any questions?
I think that's all we've got at this point so far.
Now the residential refrigerators, a lot of people should be asking their questions about the residential refrigerators in the wintertime when you're getting ready to winterize them, because a lot of people are not winterizing them properly. I've seen several of the valves on the back that cracked because they would blow out the lines or everything, and then they'd leave the water in the refrigerator. Anytime you winterize a residential refrigerator, if you don't want to run your pink antifreeze through and you're running air pressure to blow it out, leave the refrigerator turned on. Leave the air in the lines. All it's going to do is blow all that water out of the lines, and you might make a little bit of a watery mess in your freezer as it spits out into the freezer.
Sure.
When it cycles, it's going to spit that air and water mixture out. But in the long run, you're going to turn it off, and all those little ice crystals are going to melt the water, and you're going to wipe it out anyway. So make sure you winterize them properly, or you could have damage inside your water heater.
Right.
Another thing that we skipped over, because this does not have it, but there are also some of them that have washing machines and some of them that have dishwashers.
That's what I was just going to ask you about.
Now the dishwashers and water heater, or dishwashers and washing machines, they're the same way. Just run an empty load. Make sure that when you're running your refrigerator or your washing machine, that you run it on the cold side. Make sure you're getting all the pink out of the cold side, and then turn it off. Make sure when you turn it back on, it flips go back to hot then, and flush that line out too, because you want to flush both lines out.
Yeah.
Right. And warm might take a couple cycles before you do it. But if you go all the way to cold, it'll only run the cold. If you go all the way to hot, it'll only run the hot. And if you get them flushed out, then your first load should be fine.
So really, just to be safe on pretty much anything like that, whether it's a dishwasher or a washer dryer or an ice maker, you really want to run a few cycles of all of that.
Run a few cycles through it.
Once
At least
it's
one.
unwinterized.
At least
Yeah.
one.
Sure.
You know, anything, your dishwasher only has a hot line going to it. There's no cold. All you have is hot. So when it runs, once it starts running fresh water, you're going to have it. Now, after you've got it all flushed out, if you have low point drains, don't forget to drain your low point drains, because a lot of your low point drains, you've got a pipe like this long before you get to it. Well, you've got a pipe coming across here with a T-trap that drops down to the low point drain, and if you haven't drained them, you might have them full of antifreeze here. And what happens is, as that water goes across the top of this T-pipe, it wicks that antifreeze out, and you get foamy water for quite a while. So don't forget to tap out your low point drains and make sure there's no antifreeze sitting in those.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay.
All right. Is there anything in specific that we should do, like with outside showers or that type of thing?
That again is one of the faucets that you will run when you're de-winterizing it. You're going to run both the hot and the cold in the sink in the kitchen,
right,
in the sink in the bathroom, in the shower, in the toilet, in the washing machine, in the dishwasher, outside sink, water heater, you want to flush everything out until there's nothing but clean water coming out. And at that point, what a lot of people will do, because it's at the beginning of the year, it's all flushed out. Now they'll take and they'll add about a quarter tank of water to their water tank, and they'll put a cup or so of bleach in there. And after that's gone through, you open up your lines until you can smell bleach out of each one of your lines, and then let it set overnight, and then let it all drain out, run fresh water through. And
so that's kind of a good way to sanitize your tank then?
Right, that sanitizes the fresh water. Yep.
Great. So a couple more questions here. Are there other things that our customers should be doing in order to get their camper ready for camping season?
Oh, well, make sure you check all your fluids, like always. Before you go on a trip, you want to check your oil, your transmission fluid. Tire pressure is very important. Tire pressure on a rig that big can really make a difference in how long your tires last.
So like doing a lube oil filter change, is that good at the beginning of the season before you start? Or?
I would actually recommend you do it at the end of the season before you put it away. The reason for that is because you've got your old oil that's sitting in your engine, and the old oil has contaminants in it. So that oil's sitting there against your bearings, bearing surfaces and everything, with all the contamination in it. There could be water in the oil. You know, there's anytime your engine runs, you get a little bit of moisture in your engine.
Sure. That
water can sit against those bearings. If you get fresh oil before you put it away, it's much easier on your internal parts of your engine.
Another quick question. Is it okay to dump antifreeze on the driveway or out onto the street?
You can drink the antifreeze and it won't kill you. It won't hurt anything. It's 100% biodegradable. It won't kill your pets if they eat it or anything. As long as you're using RV antifreeze. Now let me stipulate that. I have heard of people that have used regular automotive antifreeze, and that's not good.
Not a good idea.
It's not a good idea for you because you're going to be drinking out of those lines. There's always a little bit of residual left over, so you will get a little bit of foam at times when you first start using your water system again. Because as that water washes out that pink antifreeze has been set inside those pipes all winter.
Right.
So it's going to leave just a little residual in there until you wash it through a few times. No, but you can run it out on the ground, it won't hurt them.
So let's talk about batteries for a minute and kind of some recommendations there and what you need to do to get your coach ready.
Most battery sets, I've seen them go as much as 5 years, 6 years. Most batteries, if you take care of them, can last that long. As long as you keep them full of water and don't let them go dead. The two hardest things on the battery is let them get low on water because the plates will dry out, and also if you let them go below the normally discharged rate of a battery is about, I think it's about 10.5 volts. If it goes below that, the battery actually starts to calcify and it'll eat itself up. So if you let a battery go dead, that's harder on it than charging it all the time.
So how often do you need to be checking your battery as far as for maintenance and things throughout the year?
It depends on how new the battery is. Most of the time, your deep cycle batteries, if all you're doing is driving from your house to a campground and you're plugging it in, chances are you're not really cycling that battery up and down much. Because even when you get in it and drive it, your alternator is charging. So if you're using your deep cycle batteries at dry camping and you're cycling them down and cycling back up, they'll use more water. And the older the battery is, the more water it'll use.
Right.
And the water just basically evaporates out. And you should use distilled water when you're filling them back up. Just try to clean off the top of the battery so when you take your caps off, you don't knock all the dirt off the top of the battery down inside.
Right.
And just check them at the beginning of the season, then check them in a month. And in a month, if they're still up there, check them in 2 months.
Right.
If you're not using them a lot, and if you're going all year, then maybe next year you're going to check them every other month.
Right.
Depending on how much you use them.
So I know here at our dealership, we remove all of the batteries from our coaches as a part of the winterizing process. So why don't you talk about that a little bit, about why we do that, and then a little bit about reinstallation.
Well, the reason why we remove them is because if a battery does go dead in the wintertime, as cold as it is around here, it'll freeze because you don't have your acid or your electrolyte mix that you have inside the battery when it's dead. It basically turns into distilled water, which will freeze below 32 degrees.
Right.
So If your battery stays fully charged, you don't have to worry about it. Battery will not freeze if it's charged up. But if it goes dead, it will freeze. So that's why we replace them. And under warranty, if your battery freezes and it cracks, warranty will not pay that. It will not take care of it at all. If you freeze it, it's yours. So the reason why we take them out is because we can keep them all inside, and I can periodically charge them through the wintertime. Right. So I'll take a bank of 10 or 15 batteries and I'll tie them all together, and I'll charge them for maybe a week. Then I'll take them off and I'll check, and then I check them to make sure they're all okay.
So now, if a customer is going to leave the batteries inside of the motorhome while the Coach is winterized, what do they need to do anything throughout the winter months while that's there?
I would at least come out and turn the disconnect on and make sure you have lights and things, because check your voltage more than anything else, because you could have lights and still only have 11 volts. So if it's starting to get down, throw a charger on it or plug it in. Let it
turn
turn the Coach on and let it charge for a week or so.
Okay. Another question that we have here, it says, I know we're talking about de-winterizing, but if I blow out my water lines, do I leave the lines pressurized with air or release the air pressure?
It really doesn't make any difference. I leave the air in them when we do them here, because, and the main reason we do it here, well, there's two reasons why you blow them out rather than put antifreeze in. It's much nicer in the spring. You don't have to wash out all that antifreeze. When you blow them out, when you get everything blown out, the last thing you do is you put antifreeze down the P-traps in the drains, because those will have water and they will freeze. So make sure they get plenty of antifreeze down so they won't freeze. But when you blow them out, it doesn't hurt to leave the pressure on. I do that for a couple reasons. If I go out and check it in a week, and especially a used one that just came in and we don't find any leaks on it anywhere, but if it won't hold air, it's not going to hold water either. So if I can check it in a few days and it still has air pressure, I know that it doesn't have any leaks anywhere. As far as blowing them out goes, you won't get 100% of the water out, but any little bit of water that's left in there is not going to be enough water to expand where it's going to break anything, so you don't have to worry about that. Just blow the majority of the water out when you're doing it.
Another question that we have here is, what do you suggest to prevent moisture in lower exterior storage compartments? And is there a product that we can place in the compartment to absorb moisture?
I don't know what you could put in there. I've seen people put, in the wintertime, when they go to store them, they'll put just wad up newspapers and put them there, because newspapers will absorb moisture. I don't know if there's a product. I honestly don't. Usually it's because there isn't a good deal of insulation in that compartment, and it's getting cold from outside and it condenses and stuff.
So is there any way to help prevent or at least decrease the amount of moisture that you're getting in exterior compartments? Any steps that you can take to try to help that?
Well, it just depends on how cold and how warm. If you're using it a little bit in the wintertime and you're warming up and then you're cooling down, you're creating that moisture, because you're warming the Coach up with the furnace and then letting it cool back down. So you could be creating some yourself. Make sure that you're not actually getting condensation or moisture in there from a leak someplace too. So it could be that it's leaking in through a lot of the doors around your compartments are all sealed around here, and I've seen where the water drips off and it gets into here, and once it gets into here, it'll wick down into the Coach and run in. So make sure you don't just have a compartment door that's leaking. As far as moisture, I'm sure there are. I've seen there is a product out there, but I don't know what it's called. It's like a discant bag that you put it in, and it changes color as it absorbs moisture. And then when it gets when it's full, you take and you put it in your oven, and you bake all the moisture out of it. Then you can use it over again. So you can use them over and over and over. But I'm not sure what it's called.
Well, and that would be a good question, that if you do want to follow up on that at all, if you call and talk with our parks department, Lonnie or David.
He'd probably be able to tell you what it is.
Yeah, we'd probably be able to come up with a recommendation and help you. Maybe they have different ideas on that too, since they've dealt with that a little bit more as well. So, are there any other recommendations that you have, kind of as we take the Coach out of storage? If there's anything else that should be inspected?
Well, if you're capable of going up on the roof, and I don't want anybody falling off roofs that Bill told me to get on the roof. But if you're capable of going on the roof and checking it out, check your seals Now, Winnebago uses self-leveling silicone on all their roofs, except for the rubber roofs on a couple of the units that they have out there.
Which they're not using.
Which they're not doing anymore, but there are a few out there.
Yep.
So everything else has got that self-leveling silicone. The self-leveling silicone, I've seen where self-leveling silicone looks great, and if you take your fingernails and pop it up around the edge, it's just laying on it. So you can actually lift it off the deck, and it's not sticking. If you find anything loose like that, you have to clean it all up and put new self-leveling on it. Now, silicone won't stick to silicone, so if you are doing repair, you have to clean all the old silicone off, or otherwise you won't get a good seal.
So really just patching it is not a good idea.
Patching it would be a temporary fix. If you didn't want to fix it yourself and you found a leak, if you clean it up good and put some self-leveling over the top of it, it will settle down in and it will seal somewhat. But as it moves, it's just kind of sitting on top of it. As it moves, it gets loose, and then I can peel it off.
So, like, how often should somebody be checking the sealant that's on their roof?
Once a year is enough.
Okay.
It really is. And I'll put a little disclaimer with that. If you're down south where it's really, really hot most of the time, the heat can kind of dry things out. But for the most part, once a year should be enough. If you do a good job of inspecting it, you shouldn't have any problems for a year. It shouldn't give you any troubles.
Sure. Very good. Let's see. Okay, how about another quick question? Should you start your generator and run it as you unwinterize?
Well, actually, you should be doing it all the time. If you talk to the generator manufacturers now, you will find some of them that say you should run them for an hour. The majority of them say you should run them for 2 hours every month, isn't it?
We actually, we just did a little snippet on that in our last month newsletter. And so I read up myself through different generator manuals, and now the official recommendation from Cummins, which would be the majority of our generators that are in a Winnebago coach, and a lot of other manufacturers for that matter as well. The official recommendation is that it is run a minimum of 2 hours every month.
Right. And they want it about 50%.
Right, under some type of load. Right. So that means that when you are exercising your generator, you want to be turning a few things on.
Run the air conditioner. Even if it's warm outside, you can cool it down enough to give it a little bit of a load. Right. Or if you have a heat pump, you run the heat pump.
Right. Because, I mean, ultimately, exercising your generator, that's what's going to make sure that all those moving components are still operating properly. It'll cycle new fuel throughout the line.
Yeah, the majority of the coaches out there, unless it's a diesel coach, the majority of the coaches out there use fuel out of your tank. And you might have a 30-foot piece of quarter-inch line that fuel runs through to the generator. And if you leave it set, that turns into varnish eventually. You know, they always say to put stable in your gas tank before you put it away. If you're going to do that in the wintertime, run your generator for a while. Get some of that stable in there too. Because if you're going to leave it set for 3-4 months in the wintertime, or even 6 months in the wintertime, you want something other. You're not going to start it up there, go out and start it up every month. You want something like stable in there to do it. A couple things, not just the gas, but it keeps the rodents from getting in there. You know, when you run them every once in a while, it'll keep the moisture out of it, the corrosion. Most of your generators are located behind the rear wheels. So you get a lot of salt spray and everything off the road, especially in the fall and in the spring. So the warmer that generator is from time to time, it keeps that moisture out of it. Keeps corrosion and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, really, just in general, probably when you're unwinterizing your coach, it's probably a good idea just to kind of check all of your systems to make sure that everything's working before you get out on the road, and then potentially end up with something that's not working properly, so you can get it taken care of before you're out on your vacation or trip.
Absolutely.
So. All right, I think we've gone through all of our questions. Any other notes that you can think of that we should discuss as we talk about unwinterizing and getting ready for spring?
Well, like I said, the things that people forget are the batteries. You know, they plug it in and everything's working, and then they forget the tires. Tire pressure is very important. You know, you will ruin tires by running them underinflated. Not to mention, if you blow one out, that's a big chunk of change going down the road. That's a lot of weight there. You know, you blow out a tire, you may do some damage. You don't want that. So.
Yeah, definitely. Is there anything as far as like sewer related that people need to be aware of when they're either winterizing or unwinterizing that area?
Well, when you're winterizing, the very, very last thing you're going to do, because you're going to flush all your antifreeze down your drains. You're going to flush all the, everything you're flushing out goes into your sewer. The very last thing you're going to do is empty your sewer.
Sure.
And so in the spring, when you get done running all that out, before you take off, you could run enough water to where you could have a half a tank of gray water when you get done. So go out and drain it. Make sure you get, always use an additive in the sewer for the black tank. Always use an additive in there. It does two things.
What do you mean by an additive?
Well, they make, Thetford makes different chemicals for the toilets. And make sure it's approved for the toilets too, because I just got done working on a toilet yesterday that I don't know what they were cleaning it with, but whatever it was not, it wasn't good for the toilet because it had swelled up the seal to where the blade was catching on the edge of the seal rather than going underneath it like it was supposed to, because the seal had expanded to almost twice its normal size. So make sure you're using chemicals when you're cleaning and when you're adding chemicals into the black tank that are safe for the plastic toilets.
Right. That's a really good point too. And I mean, especially when so many of us think of our RV as another home, which it is.
It is.
But the thing that we don't think about is that the plumbing system is a lot different in a motorhome than what it would be at your house. So when you're using cleaning products and things of that nature, you just want to be careful and conscious of what you're using.
Now, more and more of the higher ends are using ceramic toilets, and they're using the electric flush toilets and things like that. So they're getting more.
Speaking of toilets, we do have a question here. Just wondering if there's anything specific that they need to do in order to prep their toilet for use again, other than just flushing it out.
Well, what I would have done is in the wintertime is if you have it, you can get it from Thetford. It's a seal lubricant that you can get from Thetford, and you dump a little bit on the blade, and then you do a quick flush so it kind of washes across it, and just leave a little bit on the seal. And what that does is it gets between the blade and the seal, and it lubricates it so that it won't stick. A lot of times if you just use water, and when you clean it all out and you're done, you've got all your air out and water out and everything, your blade will kind of stick to the blade that comes across, or the ball valve will stick to that seal. And if it's several years old and sticks tight enough, the first time you run it, you can actually ruin the seal. It'll tear just enough of that seal off to where it won't seal.
Okay. And so that's a product that you can get.
It's a product you can get. Thetford makes it.
Okay.
I'm sure there's other companies that make it.
And so then it looks like our last question is wondering if their generator is powered by propane, if the same rules apply, which I'm guessing that they're referring to the exercising that we were talking about.
They want you to exercise it regardless.
Yep.
Propane isn't like, well, diesel doesn't really go bad when you let it set in the lines like gas does, and propane won't either. A lot of your commercial units will run. Yeah, a lot of your commercials will run propane because you can leave it in there for years and not have to worry about it going bad. But as far as exercising the generator, they still want you to exercise the generator. It's good for, like I say, it's good for the electronics in it to get warmed up. Another thing I run into with generators, it has nothing to do with winterizing or anything, but I've run into people that live down south and they say, well, it's so hot down here that when I run it, I take the cover off because all that hot air gets out. Well, the generator manufacturer says don't do that. The generator is designed to pull air in across and then blow it back out a certain way. And if you're opening up this door, now your air is being blown here and it's being sucked in from here. It's not doing the normal flow. You need to run these things with the doors on and the way they're designed, because they're intended to run. Otherwise, you could have hot spots in your exhaust, end up having an exhaust leak. You can have maybe there's a section, a module or something that doesn't get adequate airflow if you open that up, and it could overheat. So. Well,
I mean, I think the big thing is too that even if you can't exercise it for the 2 hours or. You want to make sure that you're doing something with it.
You want to make sure it runs.
I mean, really, it's a pretty minor time commitment for something that, for the majority of RVers, their generator is one of, if not the most expensive component that's a part of their coach. And so if you don't do that, you can end up with...
Well, it also is expensive when you come to trade. Because if your generator is not running when you come into trade, then it's an iffy thing, and until it gets running, it's up in the air. And if it runs when you bring it in, questions are answered, we know it's wrong.
Right.
And if you just started, even if you didn't do it for 2 hours every month, if you just started it and let it run for 5 or 10 minutes, you would